If you ever drive the E42 through the Ardennes, there is a stretch where the radio goes to static. Locals will tell you it is the hills, the trees, military installations, anything but what is written in 3 different languages on a rusted sign, half hidden by pine branches at kilometer marker 143. In memory of the missing of December 1944, the forest took them. That is the official story. It is not the true one. If you are still with us, listen. By the end of this, when you see a stand of dark trees on the side of an old road, you will not think of a scenic view. You will think of a debt, and the way a forest can remember. ACTI, the village and the lie. On paper, it was simple. December 1944. The German army had launched its last great offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. In the chaos of deep snow, frozen roads, and shifting front lines, an American infantry platoon was ordered to move through a Belgian village at the edge of the woods and deal with suspected collaborators. In the records, the village is just a name. Rochêne, population 187, 1 church, 1 tavern, a cluster of stone houses and barns that had stood for 200 years. On the map, it was a dot in the shadow of endless pine. The platoon was Unit C, 3rd Battalion, 110th Infantry, 34 men on the roster. Cold, exhausted, most of them barely old enough to shave. They had been marching and fighting for weeks when they got the order. It came down from a captain whose name would appear on commendations and citations in the years after the war. Captain John H. Merritt. 42 years old, career officer, decorated in North Africa and Italy. On the surface, the kind of man you read about in clean, patriotic histories. There are no photographs of Merritt in Rochêne that day, but there are other things, fragments, survivor testimony, German reports, one diary, and the way certain men would wake in their beds decades later, drenched in sweat, smelling smoke, hearing a song in a language they had never bothered to understand. We will start with the order. According to the battalion log, the order was written at 4:30 hours, December 19, 1944. It reads, "Proceed to Rochêne. Reliable SOURCES report enemy sympathizers providing shelter, food, and guidance to German recon elements. Secure village. Interrogate males of fighting A. Discourage further collaboration. Use discretion, 2 words. They did not specify what kind. Merritt gathered his platoon in the half-light before dawn. They were stamping their feet, clapping their gloved hands, steam rising from their mouths. Snow creaked under boots. Artillery rumbled far off, a constant, distant growl. He outlined the mission. He told them there were snitches in the village. He said German patrols had been slipping through American lines because peasants were hiding them and pointing out weak spots. He said they would go in hard, make an example, and move on. Some of the men nodded. Some shifted uneasily. One of them, Private First Class Daniel Karcher, 21, from Ohio, would later write in his pocket notebook, "We went into Rochêne to scare people. That is what he said, scare them. I don't think any of us knew what that would mean until it started." The notebook was found in a box in an attic in 1998 after Carter died. His family turned it over to a historian. That is why we can hear his words now. At 600, Unit C moved out. They walked down a frozen track past black trees. The sky was low and the color of dirty wool. Snow fell in lazy, heavy flakes that stuck to helmets and the barrels of rifles. Ahead of them, smoke curled from the chimneys of Rochêne. Roosters crowed. Somewhere, a dog barked. The war had already passed over this place once. A German half-track lay burned out at the crossroads, its metal belly blackened, its wheels sunk in ice. At the edge of the village, Merritt raised his hand. The column halted. He gave orders, quick and clipped. 2 squads to the far side of the village to cover the tree line. 1 squad with him into the square. He told them, "Anyone RUNS, you shoot." He said it like someone reminding you to put on your gloves. They moved in. In the square, a statue of the Virgin Mary stood with her hands outstretched, dusted with snow. The tavern door opened. A man in a wool cap stepped out, squinting. He froze when he saw the soldiers. Merritt shouted at him in English, then broken French. "Hands up, call everyone out." Within minutes, villagers were spilling into the square. Men, women, children. They stood in the snow in their coats and shawls and clogs, blinking at the Americans. Some made the sign of the cross. Some tried to speak. They were shushed and shoved and lined up at gunpoint. This is how it looks in the official narrative, an officer carrying out orders. A tense but controlled operation. Questioning, searches, warnings issued. But that is not what happened. We know because of 3 things. The first is Carter's notebook. The second is a German intelligence report filed weeks later based on partisan rumors. The third is the testimony of a boy who watched from the trees. His name was Luke. He was 15. He had been running messages between Belgian partisans in the forest and families in the village for months. He knew every footpath, every hiding place. He knew when the Germans were coming. He knew when the Americans were coming. He knew to stay away from the square when guns were pointed at his neighbors. That morning, when the soldiers arrived, Luke slipped like a fox along the frozen hedgerow and into the darkness between the pines. He found a spot on a low ridge where he could see the whole square through a veil of branches. He lay on his stomach in the snow and listened. He heard Merritt barking orders. He heard the translator, one of the sergeants who had picked up enough French to swear and threaten. He heard villagers pleading that they had given food to both sides because they were afraid, because men with guns had knocked on their doors in the night and said they would return if they did not help. Luke heard the word traitor. Traitor spat like a curse. He watched as soldiers kicked open doors, dragged out sacks, turned over tables. He saw one of them, a young man with a cigarette dangling from his mouth, rip down a little flag with a black cross from a wall and stomp it in the slush. He did not know then that it was a Flemish nationalist symbol. He only knew the soldier laughed. For a while it was just chaos. Shouting, crying, the slamming of doors, the crash of wood. Then Merritt made a decision. In Carter's notebook, the line is simple. He picked 6. Just picked THEM. 6 men were pulled from the crowd. The baker, the schoolmaster, 2 farmers, the tavern owner, and a man who worked as a mechanic on the German trucks because that was the only work he could find. Merritt accused them, through his interpreter, of helping the enemy. Food, information, shelter, they protested, begged. One of them swore he had only ever given a German soldier a glass of water. Another said the partisans had forced him. Merritt did not listen. He had lost men in an ambush 2 days before. He had walked past American corpses in ditches with their mouths full of snow. He had stood over a dead 19-year-old from Kansas whose dog tags clinked in the wind. He was tired. He was angry. He was afraid. Fear is a kind of liturgy. You move through familiar gestures so you don't have to think. He ordered the 6 men to be taken to the barns on the edge of the village. He told his men to discourage collaboration. He did not use the word kill. He did not have to. Luke watched as the 6 were marched away, stumbling in the snow. He slid further back into the trees. He knew those barns. He had hidden there as a child, playing. He had kissed a girl there once on a dare. He knew there was only one way out when the doors were barred. He started to run through the forest, parallel to the path, his heart pounding. He did not know what he could do, but he could not just lie and watch. At the barns, the 6 men were shoved inside. Merritt stood in the snow, his jaw clenched. His breath hung in front of him like smoke. The men inside pounded on the doors and shouted. He called over Sergeant Frank Delaney. Delaney was 25, Boston accent, quick hands. He had a reputation in the platoon as someone who did not flinch. Merritt handed him a jerry can of fuel. He said, "Let's make this fast." In his notebook, Carter writes, "We all just stood there. I knew it was wrong, I knew that, but no one said anything. It was like we were watching a movie and couldn't get up." Delaney hesitated for half a heartbeat. Then he splashed the fuel along the base of the barn wall. The smell spread like a ghost. One of the villagers broke from the crowd and ran toward them, screaming. A woman. She fell in the snow when a rifle butt caught her in the chest. Delaney struck a match. The flame shivered in the cold air. He touched it to the soaked straw. For a moment, nothing. Then fire ran along the wall with a sound like someone inhaling. It climbed. It roared. Smoke poured from the gaps in the planks. Inside, the 6 men screamed. Luke burst from the trees just in time to see the flames leap. He cried out. No one heard him under the roar. He took one step toward the barn. Then he saw the guns. He stopped. His fingers bit into the bark of a tree until they bled. Inside the village, people dropped to their knees. Some tried to run to the barn. They were held back at gunpoint. A little girl sobbed so hard she vomited into the snow. The smell changed, from wood smoke to something heavier, sweeter. Human, the fire burned fast. When the roof collapsed, sparks floated over the snow like fireflies. Then it was just a black, smoking skeleton in the white field. Merritt watched until the screaming stopped. Then he turned away. He told his men to search the rest of the houses and confiscate anything useful. Carter wrote, "When we marched out, the whole village was on its knees in the snow. They didn't look at US. They looked at the barn, like someone had died there that we couldn't see. Maybe more than 6. Luke lay flat in the trees, his face pressed into the snow until the soldiers were gone. When he finally got up, his cheeks were burned raw from the cold and from tears. He walked down to the blackened barn. The air was thick with smoke and something else. He did not look inside." In his own testimony, given 50 years later to a researcher with a tape recorder, he said, "They did not just kill 6 men. They killed the idea that the Americans were different. We had hated the Boches. We had waited for the liberators. That day, I understood there were just men with guns and men without." He went back into the forest. He did not go home that night or the next. He stayed with the partisans. He listened when they told him it was not the time to strike back. Not yet. He waited. In the battalion log, the entry for December 19th is one line. Rochêne SECURED. Collaborators discouraged. No friendly casualties. ACTII. The men who left the WOODS. Wars end on paper before they end in men's heads. In May 1945, Germany surrendered. In the Ardennes, the snow melted. The dead that had not been buried sank deeper into the forest soil. New leaves grew over shell holes and craters. Unit C went home. Captain John Merritt returned to Ohio. He was discharged with honors. He got a job with a construction firm. He married a school teacher. They had one daughter. He told funny stories about mishaps in basic training. He did not talk about Rochêne. Frank Delaney went back to Boston. He worked at the docks for a while, then joined the fire department. He liked the sirens, the rush. He told himself he was saving people now. Maybe that could balance the scale. Private Daniel Carter used the GI Bill to study engineering. He drank too much. He woke some nights smelling smoke and could not find the source. He did not tell his wife why he could not stand the sight of barns. Others scattered across America. Mechanics, salesmen, railway workers, accountants. Some joined the new war in Korea. Some buried their uniforms in closets and decided to forget. In the village of Rochêne, 6 families had new graves. The barns were rebuilt, but people said the milk tasted different that year. The priest preached forgiveness from the pulpit. In the forest, the partisans buried their weapons in oilcloth and went back to farms and shops. Luke did not go back to being a boy. He could not. He had walked too close to the fire. He stayed in the forest a little longer, helping to clear mines and mark where shells still slept under the soil. Then he went to Liege. He worked in a factory. He married. He had a son. He did not forget. He learned to read maps and numbers from an older Union man who had once been a surveyor. He took evening classes in English in a crowded room above a cafe, repeating unfamiliar words until his throat hurt. He kept old names in his head like coordinates. In 1954, a British journalist came to the Ardennes to write about the 10-year anniversary of the battle. He wanted stories of heroism, of last stands, of friendly American GIs giving chocolate to Belgian children. In a tavern, someone told him about Rochêne, about the barn, about the 6. The journalist wrote a few paragraphs in his notebook, then decided it did not fit the story his editor wanted. He left it out of the article. History took a step to the side, but the forest did not forget. If you're still with us, pay attention here. This is the part where the story starts to sound impossible, where names on paper begin to look like targets on a map. If you look at a map of unexplained accidents, deaths, and disappearances connected to former members of Unit C between 1949 and 1975, you will see something. Not at first, but if you trace the edges like smoke curling around a shape, you will see the outline of trees, forests. It started small. In 1949, one of the riflemen from Unit C, now a park ranger in Oregon, slipped from a fire lookout tower and fell to his death. The official report notes: cause, high winds, possible loss of balance. The day was recorded as calm by other rangers. The man's last radio transmission mentioned hearing singing, faintly, below the tower, when no one should have been there. Over the next 10 years, 3 more names from the Unit C roster ended up in forest reports. One disappeared while deer hunting in upstate New York. His footprints led into pines and simply stopped. One was crushed under a jumping tree during a logging job in West Virginia. One drove off a mountain road in the Rockies into a fur-lined ravine, his tire tracks curving toward the drop as if something had tugged at the wheel. In each file, the word accident appeared. In each file, there is no mention of Belgium, no mention of Rochêne, no cross-reference between names. Just one man after another meeting the same kinds of endings they had helped write for others. In total, 11 men from Unit C died in or because of forests after Rochêne, 6 in a barn, 5 in the years that followed. In Boston, Frank Delaney read about the logging accident in a newspaper. He cut out the article. He kept it in a drawer. He did not show it to anyone. He did not need to. He knew what it meant. In Ohio, Daniel Carter heard about the ranger's death from a mutual friend. He wrote in his notebook. Another one, forests, always Forests. He did not write the name Rochêne. He did not have to. It would be easy to say this is just storytelling, pattern making. Humans drawing lines between stars, except for one thing. Captain John Merritt did not die in a forest. He was careful. He did not hunt. He did not camp. He stayed in cities and suburbs under streetlights and open sky. For 20 years after the war, he did not step among trees taller than his house. He told people he had had his fill of the outdoors during the war. They laughed. They believed him. Even so, the forest found ways to lean closer. In 1959, the company he worked for won a contract to build a new highway through a wooded area outside town. He was made project manager. For 6 months, he drove out to the site every day. He stood at the edge of the tree line while bulldozers roared and chainsaws screamed. He wore a hard hat and smoked cigarettes and told himself this was different. Trees came down. Roots ripped from the soil like teeth. The highway advanced. What Merritt did not know was that someone else had been tracing his new route long before the forestry call came. One afternoon, a young surveyor came up to him with a rolled map. He was Belgian. His accent was soft. His name tag read Ldebacker. Merritt felt something in his chest when he heard the name. He could not say why. The surveyor smiled politely. He asked Merritt where in Europe he had served. Most veterans liked to talk. They would compare towns and rivers, share stories. Merritt said, "Just around." The surveyor looked at him for a moment. His eyes were pale and steady. He said, "The Ardennes." Merritt's cigarette burned down to ash between his fingers. He said nothing. The surveyor unrolled the map. His hands were steady. The veins on the back of them stood out like fine branches. He pointed to a section of forest on the blueprint and said, "This part here we must be careful. The ground is old. Sometimes it gives way where you do not expect." Merritt swallowed. He nodded. He told himself it was just a coincidence. Belgian men worked all over the world now. The war was over. Names were just names. That night he dreamed of the barn. He woke up with the taste of smoke in his mouth. He lay in the dark and listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the baseboard heater, the faint rush of cars on the road. Underneath it, for a moment, he thought he heard another sound, wind in branches, whispering in a language he had never bothered to learn. He got up and went to the kitchen. He made coffee he did not drink. Outside, in the small patch of yard behind his house, the lone maple tree tapped its bare fingers against the window. In Liege, Luc de Backer, now in his 40s, stood at his own window and looked out at the dark line of hills. He had not seen Rochêne in years. He still woke some nights with smoke in his nose. He had learned English in evening classes. He read newspapers. He had seen an article about American highway projects and the need for foreign surveyors. He had signed up. He had gone where the work was. When a contract appeared in a place where one of his pins sat on the map, he volunteered first. This is where the official records stop helping us. There is no document that says. LUCDEBACKER decided to hunt down the men who burned 6 of his neighbors alive. But there are other signs. A list of job postings circled in ink. A map of the United States with pins along the old paths of Unit C's veterans. A letter to his wife saying he would be gone for some months, and that it was something he had to do. Revenge is not an instant. It is a long walk through the trees. ACTIII. The forest takes what it is OWED. The last winter of Merritt's life came early. Snow fell in November. The highway project was nearly complete. A ribbon of asphalt curved through what had once been dense woods. On either side, stumps and raw earth waited for grass and shrubs and time to soften the wound. Merritt had grown more careful as the years passed. He checked locks twice. He avoided dark alleys. He did not go to reunions. He did not answer surveys from historians. Sometimes in hardware stores or post offices, he would see an old man with a curtain set to his shoulders and wonder if he had been in Rochêne that day. He never asked. One morning, the job site office phone rang. The receptionist told him there had been a report from the Forestry Service. An issue with soil stability near the last stretch of road. They wanted to meet on site. Merritt almost sent one of his assistants, almost. But something in the tone of the message, calm, precise, with a faint accent, made him say he would come himself. He drove out along the new highway. On either side, skeletal trunks stuck up from the snow like broken spears. There were still stands of untouched pine further back, dark and silent. At kilometer marker 143, a parked Land Rover waited on the verge. A man in a heavy coat and wool cap leaned against it, smoking. He straightened when Merritt pulled up. Up close, Merritt saw the lines in his face, the scar along one jaw, the pale eyes. He stuck out a gloved hand. LUCDBACKER. Forestry. Merritt took it. The grip was firm. His own palm was damp inside his glove. They walked together along the shoulder of the road. Luke pointed with his cigarette at a patch where the snow lay oddly sunken. "This ground is not right," he said. "There are CAVERNS underneath. Old ROOTS. Water, it could give way." Merritt nodded. He knelt, prodded at the snow with his boot. He did not see the small metal stake driven into the earth a few feet away. He did not see the thin cord half buried in powder. Luke stepped back. In Carter's notebook, there is a line he wrote decades earlier. "Before any of this, that feels like it belongs here." The forest was always just waiting. We thought it was a backdrop. It was the stage. When Merritt put his full weight on that patch of ground, something gave. The soil collapsed like a rotten board. He dropped with it. Snow, dirt, and a man in a heavy coat fell into a narrow pit lined with sharpened branches. They did not go deep, just enough. One branch punched through Merritt's thigh. Another slid up under his ribs. Air left his lungs in a wet rush. He tried to shout. An avalanche of snow came with him, packing around his chest. Above, the sky was a small, bright square. Luke's face appeared at its edge. For a moment, Merritt saw him not as he was, but as he had been. A boy in the trees watching a barn burn. He tried to form words, apology, excuse, anything. Luke said nothing for a long time. His breath smoked in the cold air. Snowflakes landed on his lashes and did not melt. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet. "We remember," he said. He dropped something into the pit. Merritt flinched. It was a matchbox. Luke struck a match on the rim of the hole. The tiny flame flared, then steadied. He looked down at Merritt. "You said you were here to scare us," he said. "This is the part where you get scared." He let the match fall. It landed on dry pine needles carefully spread at the bottom of the pit under the snow. Fire does not care about decades. It eats what it is given. Flame crawled around Merritt's boots. He screamed. The sound went up into the trees and did not carry far. From the road, it might have been the cry of some animal. Luke turned and walked back to the Land Rover. Behind him, smoke began to seep up through the snow like breath. The official report on Merritt's death reads: Site inspection accident, ground collapse, subject fell into hidden sinkhole. Fatal injuries, no mention of fire, no mention of sharpened stakes, no mention of the way his body was found, charred in a pattern that suggested the flames had started from below. The coroner had never been to Rochêne. He had never stood in a Belgian winter watching a barn burn with men inside. To him, it was just another tragedy, but the forest keeps better records. After Merritt's death, the accident slowed. There were still men from Unit C living, in cities, on farms, in houses with neatly trimmed yards, but the pressure seemed to ease, as if a balance had been restored. In Liege, Luke went home. He put away his maps. He took his son to the park. He stood at the edge of the trees while the boy ran between trunks, laughing, and felt the weight in his chest lightened by a grain. He never told his family what he had done. He never said the name Rochêne aloud after that. Years later, when he was an old man, a young woman from the university came to interview him about the war. She brought a tape recorder and a list of questions. He talked about hunger, about cold, about fear. He did not mention merit, but at the very end, when she asked if there was one thing he wished people would understand about the Ardennes, he said, "The forest remembers. You think you pass through it. You think you leave it behind, but it keeps you, some part of you, and sometimes it gives something back." When he died, it was in a narrow bed in a quiet apartment with his son and grandchildren in the next room. He was in his 80s. His hands were spotted and thin. He still smelled smoke sometimes when there was no fire. He never set foot in Rochêne again. He never spoke Merit's name. But in a drawer by his bedside, there was a folded map with pins and dates, and a notebook with one sentence written at the end, in a shaky hand. The forest remembered for US. Epilogue: the sign by the road. In the 1970s, the Belgian government erected a small memorial along the highway. It was intended to mark the general area of heavy fighting during the Battle of the Bulge. Someone in an office chose kilometer marker 143. They did not know about pits and matches and a man named Merit. The sign is simple: 3 languages, Flemish, French, English, in memory of the missing of December 1944. The forest took them. Tourists stop there sometimes. They stretch their legs, they take pictures, they read the words and think of soldiers lost in snow. They do not know about Rochêne. They do not know about 6 men in a barn. They do not know about a boy in the trees, his face raw from the cold. If you are still with us at this point, remember this. Remember Rochêne. Remember the 6 men in the barn. Remember the accidents in the forests after the war. Remember Captain John Merit under the snow at kilometer 143. Remember Luc de Backer, who decided the forest deserved a say. On paper, wars end with signatures. In the world, they end when the last debt is paid. Sometimes by courts and tribunals. Sometimes by accidents and old age. And sometimes by a man who once lay in the snow and watched fire eat through wood, deciding that the forest deserved a say. The official story is that the forest took them. The truth is simpler. Someone led them back under the trees. The forest did the rest. When you drive through the Ardennes at night and your headlights pick out the bare trunks and your radio murmurs static, you will remember this. You will know that there was a day when 6 men burned in a barn and a boy in the trees decided the war was not over. And if you ever step off the road into the dark, you will look down first to see what kind of ground you are trusting with your weight.